Public Committee for the Humanities in Pennsylvania presents the Humanities Profiles of Children's Authors, part of the Profiles in Literature series featuring interviews with persons prominent in American literature for children. The moderator for this series is Dr. Jaqueline Shachter of Temple University. Today's special guest is Virginia Hamilton.
We're grateful that our distinguished guest, Virginia Hamilton, made a special trip from Yellow Springs, Ohio, to be with us. In the early years of your married life, you lived in New York City. Why did you return to your hometown?
Well, I felt that I could publish then away from New York, and I've always loved Ohio. My mother was there alone. I wanted to get back to small town living.
It was a wise move because you've created most of your outstanding books there.
That's right.
Joining me in welcoming you is a reader who's enjoyed your books, my Temple University colleague, philosopher Monroe Beardsley.
Delighted to meet you.
I'm happy to meet you.
Also with us is your friend, Virginia, Carolyn Field, coordinator of work with children for the Free Library of Philadelphia.
Welcome to Philadelphia.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
She is my partner on the Profiles series. In 1975, Virginia Hamilton created M.C. Higgins the Great, which brought her the Newbery Medal. Now we'll see a close-up of that famous medal. Now for some snapshots of the family that inspires this author. Please tell us who's in each photograph, Virginia.
All right. That's my mother, at home, relaxed. That picture appeared in our local newspaper for something that was going on. And she was having conversation with a number of people in the room at the time. Mother is almost 86. She'll be 86 Thanksgiving.
Her name?
Etta Bell Perry Hamilton.
Right. And the next snapshot is of your husband, Arnold Adolph.
There he is, flying through the air. That's my husband Arnold, and that particular photograph has to do with a book he did called Tornado. And he was actually up against a wall with some birds, but it does look like he's flying through the air.
His photograph was taken by Jill Gussow. I just wanted to cite that Arnold Adolph is a poet and anthologist who has created one book I would particularly like to recommend that emphasizes the interracial aspects of your family.
Right.
The beautiful black is brown is tan. The next photograph.
That's my daughter, Lee Hamilton Adolph. She's a violinist. She's 14. First violinist in the orchestra, and she has 4 students of her own right now. We're very proud of her. She's very good musically. Plus, she was 3rd in the state in track this year, so we're very proud of her.
Isn't that fine?
That's my son, Jamie Levi Adolph. He's 11 years old. He's a drummer, and he loves animals. He also loves football and all sports. He's quite a sportsman, Jamie.
And now we have a picture of you in the yard. Let's see where that is.
Ah, yes, there I am with my great high sunflower that I grew this year. I'm very proud of that sunflower. It was enormous, higher than anything around.
Do you have a large yard?
Yes, we have about 1.5 to 2 acre yard, and we have different things in different parts of the yard, of course. I have a big garden. We have a dog and a dog run, and then we have a lot of open space for games and so forth.
Any water on the grounds?
Well, not a lot, but we have some water.
Mm-hmm. And I think we have another picture of your daughter. Is she
right.
in the living room there?
She's in the family room there, looking very glamorous. I think she was going out on a date at the time.
And now we have a picture of your editor. Let's see if we can get that on.
That's Susan Hirschman. Good. She's the editor-in-chief of Green Willow Books, a division of William Morrow. She's also a vice president of William Morrow, and she has been my editor since my beginning as a children's book author.
Isn't that exciting?
Yes.
I think that we should cite that your Newbery winner is dedicated to Susan Hirschman. Surrounded by these loving people, Virginia Hamilton has created the books for young people that we'll see now. Published by the Macmillan Company are Zelie, illustrated by Simeon Shimen, The House of Dies Drear, with jacket by Eros Keyes, and The Time Ago Tales of Jadu, drawn by Nani Hogrogian, all three American Library Association notable books. The Planet of Junior Brown, with jacket design by James McMullen, a 1971 Newbery Honor book. Time Ago Lost, More Tales of Jadu, drawn by Ray Prather, and M.C. Higgins the Great, with jacket design by James McMullen, the first winner of the Newbery Medal to also receive the National Book Award. Published by Thomas Y. Crowell are W.E.B. Du Bois, a biography with jacket by John Wilson, and The Writings of W.E.B. Du Bois, whose jacket is by Andrew Rhodes, an ALA notable book. Published by Harper & Row is another ALA notable book, Paul Robeson, The Life and Times of a Free Black Man. Finally, published by Green Willow Books, a division of William Morrow, Susan Hirschman editor, are two books with jackets by James McMullen, Arilla Sundown, and Justice and Her Brothers. Justice is the first book in a planned trilogy.
Yes.
The other two working titles are Dustland,
yes.
and The Gathering.
Right.
All of the books that we've seen have been published since 1967. Their high quality will be probed first by Monroe Beardsley.
It seemed to me when I read several of your books that you have a very unusual ability to create strange but rather complete worlds, which are rather remote from our ordinary experience, and I should think from the daily experiences of many of your readers. And not only to create different characters, but also to place them in settings which bring out their feelings and their special values, which are so different from others, and to bring them out admirably, so that we see here people who have very rich emotional lives and also intellectual lives, despite the material poverty of their environments. I wonder if I'm right in thinking that one of the major themes that runs through several of your books has to do with self-reliance. It seems to me that there's a sense in which one brings away from reading several of these novels a sense of how admirable it is for children to grow up and to be independent and to be able to learn to cope with things. And in fact, the children tend to be a good deal more able to cope with things than their parents.
I think that's true, only I call it something else. I call it survival. I think these children represent something in my own experience, in my past. As a child living in rural Ohio, we were often on our own. We learned things by doing and making mistakes and so forth. And so I think I isolate my characters many times in a setting where they are alone, so to speak, on a mountain or wherever, in order to see them more clearly. And the children must create their own play. They must create their own dinner sometimes. They must go out and hunt for it. It is self-reliance, but I think it goes deeper than that. It's saying that given the opportunity, we will survive and we will prevail.
But survival then carries a lot of weight here. That is, for example, Junior Brown and well, especially his friend Buddy Clark, and M.C. Higgins in his own way, and Zelie, especially in her way, living in this very limited kind of environment.
That's right.
All manage to be extremely creative. They're not just getting along, but they're imaginative, and Buddy Clark is someone who obviously can take charge of his environment and make it into something much better.
Yes, I think that's very true, and I think I am interested in a kind of spiritual isolationism, and also the creativity that one finds rather spontaneous in children. I don't know what happens to it, but I think it disappears by junior high school age or something. But in the beginning, children seem to me to be abundantly creative. And I wish there was some way we could capture that and keep it without having it dissipate in all the rules and regulations that we make them go through. So what I'm trying to do in my books is to, in praise of creativity in a way, against adversity. These children can do so many things, and yet they have so little to work with.
May I ask about one other related theme? In The Planet of Junior Brown, Mr. Poole says something at one point, something like, the human race is bound to come
The
one
human
time.
race is yet to come, yes.
One time.
He does
Didn't he
say that. One time,
And then
yes.
he speaks of Buddy and Junior as forerunners. I think he uses
Right.
that term at one point.
Yes.
And there's a strong suggestion there, which struck me very forcibly, and which led me to think quite a bit, of that in some ways you think of human beings, or at least in our society as we are now, as still very much incomplete, but perhaps capable of surpassing ourselves and,
Right.
and coming to a higher level
Well,
of existence. And that something like that appears in Justice and Her
That's
Brothers.
right. I think it goes back to my study of Hegel, if we may get to
It's Hegel.
philosophy.
Oh, I'm very interested in that.
Yes, it's the coming, the consciousness through history, becoming more conscious, and it is Hegelian. And it's the idea that the longer we are civilized through history, the more we know about ourselves. And he's saying the Indian people always said the human race is yet to come. We are just the forerunners. The perfect people are somewhere else. You know, they will come and they will be understanding of all things and of nature and life and so forth. And that's what he means. Here are these boys who have so much to give, and yet they're being denied an opportunity. So he says, maybe now, maybe with the planets and so forth and the tomorrow billies, that the human race is coming. That was the point.
Very
Exciting, isn't it? Virginia, you started out to write adult books.
Yes.
Now, why did you switch to children's books?
Well,
stories?
obviously, I was more successful.
Well, but there must have been
No.
a reason why. You
Well, I had a friend who was working at Macmillan at the time. We went to Antioch College together in Ohio. And she later on became a marketing director and vice president there. But she suggested that she was working for the children's book department, suggested I take one of the stories that I'd written in college and make it into a children's book. And I said, what's a children's book? Because I had no idea what she meant. Was it different from some other kind of book? So she said, well, why don't you try it? Just, you know, think in terms of children and expand it. So that's what I did, and that was Zealy, and that's how I first got published.
Well, I'm glad you did, because you know that M.C. Higgins the Great was one of the very few books that I have ever nominated for the Newbery that won.
Oh, really?
So I'm very,
I'm
I
so
just-
happy.
An ecstasy over that. Do you think that one must write only from one's own experience?
I think that's where one begins. I think you begin with what you know. At least when you're in college or any kind of writing courses, the professor will say, write about what you know, And so I think in the beginning you want to write something very exotic, and you're not very successful because you don't know what you're talking about. So it's very good advice at first. Write about what you know. Of course, we have slews of writers who write about worlds and times and places that they've never been, that don't exist. They don't really know them. They create them. And that's what writing's all about.
From their imagination.
That's right.
Bring it
We
out,
bring,
yeah.
we always bring something of our own experience into everything we write. But we don't always write about what we know. We write about what we learn many times.
Well, you write very well based on your culture and heritage.
Yes.
Have you ever thought of writing a book about your own interracial life?
Well, Arilla Sundown, which is about an interracial Indian black family, of which there are many in my area of Ohio, is as close as I would come to any kind of autobiographical statement. I wrote that to bring a discussion of an interracial situation, not necessarily my own, but one similar. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to show the kind of forces that can be involved in that kind of relationship. What will the children do? In this case, what kind of identity would they have when one is black, one child considers herself perhaps black, and the other is very certainly Indian? You know, how do they come to terms with this? So that's what I wanted to talk about, because it is a problem. There are many, many interracial families in this country, in this world. You know, they have specific problems that they have to face.
In that book, why did you use folk language to express Amerindian thoughts?
I don't think that's what I was doing, if I may. I think what I was attempting to do, I studied Cheyenne language in order to feel how it worked. And I learned that it's a syllabic and not alphabetical at all. And so the syllables make sentences in that language. And I was trying to express the flow of the Cheyenne language in a child who would be speaking the language, who would know the language because of one of the characters, James Falseface, who was the old man who was her friend when she was a child. So this is the child speaking not only in an interior kind of way, but in an Indian way. It wasn't meant to be in a folk way or an arty way at all. It was really attempting to be in an Indian-sounding language. And it's true, that's the way it's spoken.
Well, that was a very important statement that you've just made about the trying to carry over the Native American characteristic into the dialogue, or even the remembrances.
Yes.
One of the quotations that I've read that you've made was that Orilla Sundown is one of your favorite of your own books. And I wondered if you could tell us why. Is it because it is the interracial aspect?
I don't think so. I think it was because I had a little difficulty at the beginning finding the tone for that book, but it was a book that flowed so easily that it was a pleasure to do. Now, not all books are pleasures to write. They may seem very smooth and simply done when they're written, but they're not easy. And M.C. Higgins was not an easy book, where in my mind, Orilla was very easy. I enjoyed every minute of it, and that's why I say it was my favorite book.
Well, I certainly understand.
But I love M.C., but it wasn't easy.
Yes, that's quite a following. You've also been quoted as saying that Junior Brown is your favorite of your own characters from the planet of Junior Brown. Why?
I probably said that somewhere. I don't remember where, and I'm sure I have to defend it because I said it. I think I care about Junior Brown in a kind of strange way. I say to myself, poor Junior, why did I do that to him? I left him there at 326 pounds out of his mind, you know, knowing that I would never do a sequel, or it seemed kind of unfair. Whereas I left Buddy Clark strong, whole, and here's the book called The Planet of Junior Brown. It didn't seem quite fair, so I've always said that I admired him most of all. Maybe he'll forgive me.
I'm sure he does. You know, one of the books I've enjoyed is Zelie. I wanted to know what inspired, or what was the background material that you
Well,
drew
as
upon?
I said, it came from a short story I did in college. I remember vividly writing that story. I had about 36 hours to do it for a course. I had nothing on my mind. I was looking through a Life magazine, and I saw a picture of a Watusi queen, and that's how it began. And I stayed up for 36 hours and wrote a story, which I got an A on. I thought I was very clever at the time to have carried that off. But that story was an obsession for many years. I couldn't get rid of it. I wrote it in many ways. I wrote it as Jeter and Zelie Tabor as old people. I did all kinds of things for that story because I could not get it out of my mind. It was very important to me in a certain way. And then when it came all together, I realized it was because it looked toward Africa in the form of Zelie. It brought Africa to the present, and it was talking about roots, is what it was. And it was the beginning Black is Beautiful movement in America. And it was my way of talking to that movement.
And Schimmann's drawings are nice.
Yes, in a way you were really ahead of the movement of Black is Beautiful,
that's
because Zelie is so beautiful,
That's
and
right.
the children relate to her
Right.
as a queen. She's
Yes.
just so lovely. When you were speaking about your mother, you conveyed the feeling, which I know you grew up in a very loving family.
Yes.
But I understand you're afraid of the dark. Why is that?
Oh, it's only Ohio dark.
Oh,
It's
only
so different.
Ohio
You
dark.
see, everybody in Ohio at certain periods of the seasons see flying saucers, you know. they're very crazy out there. It's a very surreal kind of atmosphere, and we all see things in the dark, and I think it's because we all grew up there, and I think that also Zealy comes from that. I used to sleep outside, you know. There could have been something coming down the road, but there never was.
Did your father influence your writing at all? You were very
My
close
father
with him.
was very artistic. He was a musician. He was a fine mandolinist. He had mandolin clubs all over, and he said he was a newspaper man at one time. My sister was a newspaper woman. So writing seems to have been something that we did in our... He used to write poetry. I never saw any of it. He talked a lot. He was a storyteller. He told marvelous stories. So was Mother. And they didn't really make up stories. They told real stories in beautiful ways. You know, they would change the real stories a little bit. When I came along, I began to create the stories because I didn't have those stories to tell. I didn't have any of my own. Somehow they collected stories in a way that I'd never learned to do it, so I wrote them down and made things up. But that's where it comes from, I'm sure.
I wonder if it's fair to ask you a little more about your current work, about the trilogy.
Yes.
Because I'm kind of interested in what seems to me a little bit of a tension here between what I perceive in Justice and Her Brothers as contrasted with what I got from Planet of Junior Brown. I mean, going back to what we were talking about before about the future development of human consciousness, it seemed to me in the Planet of Junior Brown there was a suggestion that this might be something which is open to people in general, but then in Justice and Her Brothers, it seems that there are a few gifted people who are chosen in a way and who develop these special powers.
Right.
And some of them, especially Tom, don't seem to have improved much in their ethical consciousness just because they have these special powers.
Right.
So I take it that the next two volumes are going to develop this theme to some extent.
I hope, I really think that we cannot delineate too closely themes carried through my writing. I think there's more than one theme. One theme is the human race is yet to come, and another is my more pessimistic side that says the human race is yet to come, but when it comes, it's not going to be very different than what we have now, you know. So I do different things. I look at more than one side of the question. I say, aha, maybe I'll write about this now, you know, which is part of the same thing, but without the same conclusion.
That's a Hegelian dialectical
I
pattern.
know.
Well, how do you organize your writing? What the actual work of doing it? How everybody has a different way.
Okay, I'm finished with the first book, The Justice Cycle, which is Justice and Her Brothers, and I'm at work on the second book, which is Dustland. Plotting over 3 books is extremely difficult. It is made more difficult when you are working within a genre that is unfamiliar, that is fantasy. This is the first time I've done books of fantasy. I'm rather a more naturalistic or realistic writer. So I'm learning all of it at once, plus the fact there's a lot of genetic detail that I had to study, and also psychic material, which I had to research before I could write these books. I wanted them to be authentic in this area, in speculative science, okay? Furthermore, I have 2 characters that are identical twins. I also wanted that to be authentic, and there is some remarkable research on twins that I've gone through. And I'm using all that material, trying to bring it together in a future world that may or may not exist, not saying that in some future it will exist, but it may or may not exist in the book. I am dealing with illusion within illusion within illusion in this book, and I'm going out of my mind, yes, more or less. So it's a great deal of fun, but it's very slow going because I create all kinds of illusions for different reasons, you know, in the book. It turns out it will maybe I shouldn't give this away. All right, I won't. Dustland may or may not be. All right? So I'm creating these elaborate illusions, and it's very difficult. I start at 9 in the morning, usually, and work to about 1. On a good day, maybe I get 3 pages. You know, this is very slow plotting at this stage. After the first draft, it becomes easier. The language begins to come close to the way I want it. I have to find the tone, you know, and I have to bring the language of the book up to a level that I think it should be.
Do you outline first?
No, never.
And is characterization key for you?
My editor and I have a debate about that. She thinks it is. I think plot is. I think I depend on the plot to carry me along and to develop characterization. She thinks it's the other way around.
Do your characters ever take over?
Never.
Never?
Never.
Oh, that's-
I'm strong.
You have the ending always conceived?
Only generally. I have a very general idea, and I work toward that general idea. I have absolute confidence in the idea of an ending, but I don't know exactly what it's like.
Do you have any advice for young writers today?
Oh, I think the best advice is to have them read as much as possible and everything, and to really allow their minds to absorb and to be open, and to try not to form opinions about books or anything, but to observe and to continue writing.
Thank you very much. Virginia Hamilton, author of original realistic fiction, biographies, and fantasies, has fulfilled her self-stated goal to newly write and like no one else. The former Antioch student of creative writing has been recognized with unusual honors while publishing an average of a book a year. She was the first black to achieve the Newbery Medal. M.C. Higgins the Great, her Newbery winner, also received the National Book Award, the Globe Horn Book Award, the Lewis Carroll Shelf Award, and was on the honor list of the International Board on Books for Young People. 5 of her books have been American Library Association notable books. 1, The House of Dyes Dreer. 1, the Mystery Writers of America Edgar Award, named for Edgar Allan Poe. Another work, The Planet of Junior Brown, is a Newbery Honor Book. It's been a rare privilege having you as our guest.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.